back to Insights with Dana Oakley Simard. Today I'd like to talk about another example in day-to-day television that we can watch where we can see inauthenticity in action. So today I've decided to talk about Friends, Season 10, Episode 2. This is the one where Ross is fine. And just in case you're not quite familiar with this episode, I'll just let you know that this is the one where Ross walks in on Joey and Rachel at the end of the previous episode, and they're kissing. And so the beginning of this episode starts with the same scene, and they're kissing, and Ross is very surprised, and Joey and Rachel are instantly like really uncomfortable, really nervous, really unsure what Ross's reaction is going to be. So the episode previous to this one, they've been trying to work up the nerve between both of them to tell Ross that they are interested in each other and like to be in a relationship with one another. But because they're not sure how Ross will respond, they have been, tiptoeing around it and not being able to find the right moment or the right time or the right way to do it. So they hadn't yet mentioned it to Ross. So in he walks, sees them kissing, and everybody's uncomfortable. So Ross did his very best to convince them that he's fine. He was really intense, kind of like agitated a little bit when some of the things that he was saying. He went into this really high-pitched voice, and he was getting like really kind of hyper and super intense. He invited them for dinner to sort of celebrate how this is all fine, and he's totally fine with this, and that he's loving this between Joey and Rachel. And it was kind of a strange invite. He said the only reason it wouldn't be fine is if somebody doesn't like fajitas. So he was like very intense. So Joey and Rachel were sort of uneasy and not really sure what to think. So anyway, as the episode progresses, Ross ends up having them for dinner as well as his new girlfriend Charlie, and it just kind of gets really uncomfortable for everyone. So there's kind of two examples of inauthenticity in this episode. The first one is Joey and Rachel. So they are really uncomfortable the whole way through about confiding and sort of just being honest about their feelings towards one another with Ross, because they're worried about Ross feeling hurt or not being supportive of their relationship because of his history with Rachel. So because of this discomfort, they hide it. They don't tell Ross, what's really going on when they first realize that they do have feelings for each other. So this is how the accidental walk-in kiss has happened. They also are really afraid of telling him. And they actually had agreed with one another not to even see one another anymore if Ross wasn't going to be able to be okay with it. So they were actually willing to make a huge sacrifice by dishonoring their own feelings because of Ross's unresolved issues with Rachel, which later in the episode Ross had reflected upon and realized that it had been about like 6 years or something since they were actually together. So he'd been hanging on to this kind of Rachel and Ross sort of thing that was of course it had all of us on the seat of our chairs waiting for, will they get back together? So Ross, hadn't quite let Rachel go, but had realized that, it's probably time for her to start being able to see whoever it is that she wants to see. So they were really, really going to deny themselves potentially of their own happiness with one another had Ross decided that, I'm not okay with it. And that's really significant because they were actually giving Ross all the power in that situation. Of course, when we get into situations like this, we want to be careful that we're being as respectful as we can of everybody's feelings involved. But when it comes to actually denying ourselves what we, genuinely feel or desire or need, especially in this situation where there's been 6 years of no relationship, it's clear that the relationship has ended. When we give someone else the power to make decisions for us in our lives because we don't want them to feel uncomfortable, that's really, really disempowering for us and really takes away from ourselves, as I've talked about in my previous video about what happens when we're being inauthentic. So they were willing to sacrifice their own happiness because of Ross, which I suppose is altruistic. in some respects, but at the end of the day, both of them would have been left unhappy just because Ross had these unresolved issues. So that's quite significant. The other inauthentic example here is Ross himself. So he clearly had feelings that were unresolved, and he clearly wasn't fine, as he, you know, proclaimed to be throughout the entirety of the episode. And he really, that pretending to be fine and that pretending that he was, you know, not having any feelings of any other kind towards Rachel because of the situation, that really made the evening really uncomfortable when they were all having dinner together. So when we hide our authenticity, when we deny our voice, when we deny our truth, things kind of just come out sideways. And we really see this with Ross, because he got really strange. He kept talking this high-pitched voice. He was really fast. He was talking, you know, like he wasn't really making a lot of sense. He was drunk. He was burning his hands. He forgot to put on oven mitts. He forgot what he even had made. He was really intense, and everyone was just like walking on eggshells around him because they weren't really sure what was going on with him, but they knew that he wasn't fine, as he was claiming to be. So at the end of the episode, Joey, sort of the morning after, Joey had ended up staying with Ross overnight, and Ross had sort of sobered up, and Joey and him were having a conversation, and he actually had a really beautiful moment of being authentic. He really embraced that, you know what, maybe I'm not completely fine with this, but I'm going to work to be fine with it. He realized it had been 6 years since him and Rachel had been together, and that it's probably time to start moving on. And that he couldn't imagine, you know, Rachel being with a better guy than Joey if she's going to be with anybody that wasn't him. So that was wonderful. He felt, you could see the relief in him. He felt better. Joey felt better hearing this. They were actually able to have a real conversation about how Ross was actually feeling. And from that point, Ross was able to kind of let some of that discomfort go and move on and sort of work towards finding a way to embrace what his two best friends really wanted for themselves. So it could have gone all sorts of different ways. I'm very grateful that it went the way that it did, in that Ross was able to connect to himself and then connect to Joey, and in a really vulnerable and authentic way. So that's just another example that we can see in on TV of inauthenticity, and how much things actually shift and change when we really tap into our true selves and our true voice and allow that authenticity to surface. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope to see you again next time. And this is Insights with Dana Oakley Smart. Thanks.